that we should talk about Atmanirbhar. So one of the prime aims of the Siddhi is technology for self-reliance, Atmanirbhar. And second objective is socially relevant technologies, so that we have a connect with society, which Gandhiji really wanted to do. And technology and rural development is the third objective, which is also very close to Gandhiji. So the second webinar talk in the Siddhi series is by Sri Birad Rajaram Yajnik, who is actually the director and curator of Mahatma Gandhi Digital Museum and trustee of Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts. The talk will be on Gandhi in the 21st century. And about the speaker, he's actually a digital curator and author from India. He has, for many, many years, spreading the message of Mahatma Gandhi all across the world. He has curated digital museums in several continents. And he has a book on Gandhi, which was released by the United Nations by the President to mark the International Day of Nonviolence. We have two important people who are moderating today's session. First, Professor Ravi Kumar from IIT Madras, who is a professor in the Department of Metallurgical Materials Engineering, and Professor Sanjay Mathur, who is actually from the Institute of Inorganic Chemistry, University of Cologne, Germany. And these two people were instrumental in bringing Yajnik ji to this webinar. So just to kind of give you a small inkling into the agenda. So it's just to be a kind of a short address. I'll talk about 2 minutes, and then actually I'll hand over the mic to the dean if he's available. And then Professor Mathur will take over. He will introduce the speaker. And then the speaker will speak for 40 minutes. Then we'll have a question answer session, which will be moderated by Professor Ravi Kumar for 15-20 minutes. And the closing remarks will be by Professor Karthik Raman, who is the faculty advisor of Office of Global Engagement, IIT Madras. Siddhi is a collaborative endeavor with faculty, researchers, and students involved in projects sponsored by Government of India under various projects, and also some initiatives of IIT Madras, like New India Internship. It is actually coordinated by the Office of Global Engagement, IIT Madras. Now I hand over the mic to the dean if it's available, or if it's not available, then I'll hand over the mic to Professor Ravi Kumar to introduce Professor Mathur. Professor Mathur can then take over. Thank you very much. Welcome all.
Sudarshan, this is Raghu. I'm just joined. I welcome everyone to the seminar, and Ravi Kumar, it's all yours.
Thank you, Professor Raghu. I think I'll directly hand over to Professor Mathur from University of Cologne so that we don't waste any more time. Over to Mathur.
Thank you very much, Ravi, and Professor Sudarshan, Professor Raghunathan, thank you very much for allowing us to use this initiative of IIT Madras, the Siddhi platform, to host Mr. Yajnik today. And I must say at the outset, I'm really overjoyed to see the great number of friends and colleagues who have joined. We know the statistics. We have 225 people from all over the world to this special symposium that is being organized as a part of the scheme of the Government of India for the promotion of academic and research collaboration, the SPARK project. So thanks very much to everyone for joining us today. My name is, as has been mentioned, Sanjay Mathur. I'm a professor at the University of Cologne in Germany. And on behalf of my co-host, Professor Ravi Kumar from IIT Madras in India, and in collaboration with the Siddhi initiative of IIT Madras and the American Ceramic Society Germany chapter and Material Research Society International chapter, I warmly welcome you to this special webinar that is being organized on the occasion of 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And today's talk is dedicated to the philosophy of life of Mahatma Gandhi that he himself beautifully and uniquely articulated as "my life is my message." And while going through some of the work of Mr. Yajnik, I realized that there is a word only missing. He said, "Only my life is my message." And then this simple sentence, it becomes very powerful when you ponder over it. And I know that today we have mostly scientists in the audience, and therefore I would like to point out that both the leaders of humanity that Gandhi was and the leaders of science, and there are many today who are in the audience, have one thing in common, and that is the passion to change the world towards the betterment of mankind. And in current times, when the uncertainty is the only certainty we have, even the academic collaboration is highly affected. The scientific world is also affected by the current pandemic. It is important to highlight this link that there is always hope, and this is what Gandhi brought to India. And I was reading recently somewhere that only science plus Gandhi alone can save the planet Earth. This was an article by a well-known author. And it is true in many ways, because even for his autobiography, Mahatma Gandhi has chosen the title, My Experiments with Truth. That reflects his inquisitive nature to integrate the truth. And secondly, which is very specific to his personality, was his soft approach of disowning the status quo. And this is something which is also forming the passion of the scientists. Scientists and science cannot progress without doubting the status quo. So this is very important in today's times. And in the words of today's distinguished speaker, that he wrote me in one of his emails to me, that Gandhi was a scientist of human values. And like all scientists, he saw failure as another chance to learn and to grow. And therefore, it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker, Mr. Birad Rajaram Yajnik, who actually does not need any introduction. You just need to Google his name, and a number of TED Talks and webinars will come up where he's speaking to a very diverse and broad audience all over the world. But I know that there are a lot of people, younger folks in the audience, who may not be so familiar with India and the Indian history. And for them, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Yajnik, who is an internationally acclaimed speaker, an author, and curator. He has dedicated his life in pursuit of spreading the message of Mahatma Gandhi through his innovative books, interactive talks, and curated experimental digital museums. He has authored several books. They are very well read. I'm not listing all the books, but one of his works, entitled The Great Indian Yoga Masters, it has been translated into 9 international languages, and it is distributed across the world. And as a curator for the Mahatma Gandhi Digital Museum in India and abroad as well, in Johannesburg and Pietermaritzburg, he is doing a lot of work to promote the Gandhian philosophy. He is also the trustee of Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, which is the foremost art body in India. And on top of that, he still has energy and passion for being an entrepreneur. He heads the digital interactive company Visual Quest India, which is a design and technology company which is providing services to Fortune 50 companies around the world. I would like to conclude by pointing out one special attribute of the personality of Mr. Yajnik, that I was reading, that he learns from the young and explains to the old. But the common message and the common denominator in his talks is always that the future is in your hand. You are the change, which is something that is easy to hear, but difficult to really practice. And here I would like to narrate an anecdote that I have read about his invited talk at Harvard Model United Nations India, where he proposed to create an Ahimsa Harley. From the Harley Davidson, you know, Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word for non-violence. And this bike today, it's a catalyst for change. You can see thousands of pictures of this bike, which has been signed by a lot of people. And this Gandhian version of Harley Davidson bike is now a mascot for peace around the world. And it can be also, if you would like to host it, you can ask to be delivered at your place. Obviously, you have to return it, but you can get it. So without taking any further time, I would like to hand over this virtual floor to Mr. Yajnik. Thank you, Mr. Yajnik, for your consideration to share your thoughts on Gandhi in the 21st century. Maybe one last technicality for the viewers and for the audience. If you have any comments, please take your time in the next 30-40 minutes to write them in Q&A, and this will then be read and moderated by Professors Ravi Kumar and Professor Karthik Raman. So with this, we welcome you warmly. I'm sorry, Mr. Yajnik, you will not hear the applause, so only I'm the person who can applaud, who is applauding on behalf of the whole audience. So please.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Mathur. I think your introduction, more than the introduction, I just love the way you have picked up on the aspect of change and how we like to communicate to the youth and how change is the only constant. I had written to Professor, and the lines that which he stated, I'm going to start with those lines, which says, the life of Mahatma Gandhi has been a life of change. He aptly calls his autobiography, My Experiments with Truth. We have often debated that he was a scientist of human values, and like all scientists, he saw failure as another learning. This is very important that we realize that Mahatma Gandhi believed in change and evolved every day of his life. And I'll come back to this point a little later, just by first quoting, again, what Professor Mathur just pointed out, saying that Gandhiji goes to say, "My life is my message." And then I was corrected somewhere saying that he didn't actually say that. He said, "My life only is is the message." He wanted to tell people that if I have written something at the age of 20, and then if I write something at the age of 40, please take into consideration what I've written at the age of 40, and then at 50, and then at 60, because he was trying to explain to people that change was constant in his life. He was always experimenting. He was always learning. So from that, I understood that we are going to be on this journey all the time, like Mahatma Gandhi, and we have to see the future and keep causing the change. Now, today we're going to be discussing 3 of his qualities, which I find are applicable in today's world to all of us. But before that, with the pandemic, I think it's very important to discuss what he said about environment. For example, Gandhiji quotes, "The earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed." You know, he has the power with words to communicate very important statements. For example, he goes on, "The earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand them over to at least the same way it was handed over to us." You know, my personal experience, and I guess we all have, we know what happened in week 1 of the lockdown, week 2 of the lockdown, week 3 of the lockdown, and all of us were following news. And I started following the news, and I started seeing a very interesting change in the environment where there's a lot of death and a lot of hardship being faced. The earth was curing itself. And that was to me, that was a great ray of hope. Like on the 11th day of the lockdown, the people in the city of Jalandhar, that's Jalandhar in India, could see the mighty Himalayas, a sight that they had not seen for 30 years. In 2 weeks. The European Space Agency reported nitrogen dioxide emissions had significantly decreased over Italy and other parts of Europe within 3 weeks. There were rumors about dolphins and swans in the canals of Venice. It was so interesting that I personally had the opportunity to visit the river Ganga in about week 5. And thanks to the lockdown, I was the only person on that spot. And I actually reached down with a glass and took a glass full of water, and I could drink it. I said, with all the damage that we have caused in this world, if the world can heal itself within 2 to 5 weeks, I think humanity has a great chance. And that's where I'd like to quote Mahatma Gandhi again. He says, "Our greatest ability as a human is not to change the world, but to change ourselves. If you take care of your immediate surroundings, the universe will take care of itself." I think this is very important for us to realize that Mahatma Gandhi's written word has been compiled into 99 volumes. And in those 99 volumes, if you try to look for words like sustainability, or if you try to look for words with environmental and climate change and all, you won't find them. But the beauty is that as you keep reading, you'll realize that he was referring to these things with the terminology of that day. So, I mean, I would recommend to all of you that if you get a chance, all these volumes have been put online today by the government of India on something called the Gandhi Heritage Portal. They're accessible to all, and you can actually search for any topic, and you can hear and you can see his views. We had a great opportunity very recently in Paris. It was the 1st of October, 2019. And with UNESCO, we were given an opportunity to actually have a panel discussion on education with Gandhian views. My company typically likes to explore with technology. And we actually created a hologram of Gandhiji. who actually participated in that panel discussion over 12 acts. He set the stage and then people discussed. It was really nice to see the audience react to the written word of Mahatma Gandhi being spoken in a hologram. As our next step, we're going to try and put a little bit of artificial intelligence in it, and all the volumes would be able to be spoken in his word, in his style of speaking, through this voice generator. Now, having said that, let me take the conversation back to the qualities, the three qualities that we're going to be discussing, which I think are very important in our lives and were very important in his life. The first quality that he had was being morally right. Now, being morally right is very subjective sometimes. We really have to give it an understanding of the context, where we are, what kind of situation we are in. And then depending on the situation, some people might be able to take a decision this way or that way. But at the end of the day, there has to be, we have to be able to say that, can this be proven in today's day and age? For example, I was told that, using the conscience of your opponent, as your ally is one of the greatest skills to be able to negotiate. Now, how do you use the conscience of your opponent? There was a CEO of a medical company, and he told me, he says, Birad, if you try using conscience of your opponent in a business deal, he'll cut you down to size immediately. And I was, I didn't know how to actually react to that and how to prove to him that conscience actually exists and it'll always win. Now, I had created a small 3-minute film to try and prove this. We will try and play the film for you. If for some reason the film cannot be played, you can always Google it up, and it will be under my name, but I will explain what happened to you in that film. Can we try to play the first film, The Power of Being Morally Right?
Yes, sir. 1 second.
This is the second film. For some reason, the film is you're not able to hear the audio. But I'll let the film go on because it's an interesting film, because without audio also it'll have its required impact. And I'm going to talk you through it. You notice that there's a leopard in front of you, and a leopard is actually going in for a kill. The kill is to actually a baboon. In the wild, the leopard has a natural enemy, that's the baboon. And you will see that it'll make the kill, its first kill, and then something very interesting happens at that point of time. So that's the kill. And leopards, after killing their prey, don't leave the prey on the ground, but actually take it up onto a tree for safety so that other predators don't get it. While the leopard is pulling the body up onto the tree, something very interesting happens. And you can see that the body is being pulled up on the tree, and suddenly the leopard stops and looks, and it sees a day-old infant, which is along with the baboon. Now, this is where the conscience comes in. This is like the wild. This is real footage. The leopard can actually snap the neck off of this young infant in a second. But the leopard chooses to lie down next to the infant. The leopard doesn't know what to do, but then according to me decides to do the right thing. You will see that the leopard actually will pick up this infant in its mouth and take it to safety away from the hyenas and actually protect this infant for the entire night on top of the tree. And only then it will come back to protect its prey from the hyenas. So we go along and say that, you know, as long as the animal world exists, conscience will always win in this game. So I said I think that's how we were able to prove that conscience will be the most important quality that we all have. Can we shut this film, please? And we'll go on to the next quality. So having said this, you know, the second most important quality that I'd like to talk about is perseverance. Most of you are scientists, and I think I don't need to, you know, explain how important perseverance is. But sometimes it's important to point out that Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa. He had actually been in South Africa for 20 years. He after getting his degree in law, he had gone to South Africa to join a law firm over there, and he stayed back for 20 years. On his return to India in 1915, he decided that he would like to fight for the rights of the Indian people and asked for Purna Swaraj, that means complete independence. And he achieved that in 1947. So it was 32 years that Mahatma Gandhi actually fought for the people of India against the imperial government. So to get it, it was sheer perseverance. Now, as you see, I told you he came back in 1915. 1930, he had a march called the Salt March, and I'll discuss the Salt March when I discuss the next quality. But during the Salt March, he was able to galvanize India, the 300 million people, into one force. And it is said that a grain of salt shook the empire. As a result, Mahatma Gandhi in 1931 was asked to attend the round table in London, where they said that they will discuss independence with him. And Mahatma Gandhi actually sailed on a boat called the SS Rajputana and reached England for the round table conference. Just to give you a couple of interesting anecdotes from his visit to England, you know, if you have seen the photograph of Mahatma Gandhi, he used to dress just in something which is called a loincloth, and he would have a little shawl on top of him. And somebody asked him, he says, "Are you going to see the King of England dressed like this?" His response was, "The king wears enough clothes for him and I." So I think it's important to have a good sense of humor also as you go ahead in life. Well, his second visit in England was actually to the towns where the cotton mills existed of Manchester, and because of his boycott of foreign-made goods in India, most of the people had actually lost their jobs. If you look at the photographs from that period, you will notice people in thousands actually cheering Gandhi as he goes over there. And I was also very curious. I said, these are people who have lost their jobs because of him, and they're cheering him. Apparently, the story goes that he went and told them that, "I understand your hardship, but we are also facing a bigger hardship in India." And he explained to them why it was important for him to actually start the concept of Atmanirbharta, self-reliance in India, and actually ask people to spin their own cloth and not buy foreign cloth. And as a result, it was, they lost all their jobs. Well, from there, he went on and he visited, Italy. He spent a few days with Romain Rolland in Geneva. And then, of course, he was there at the conference. And at the conference, unfortunately, the British government decided not to offer total independence. What they were willing to offer was partial. And he was not agreeable for that. So the talks broke down, and he actually returned to India around December, I would like to say the 30th of December, 1931. And I guess it's sad, or I mean, like as fate would have it, 7 days later, he was imprisoned in India by the British because he said that I will not give up my struggle. So it was pointed out a few months earlier, you were having tea with the King of England, and a few months later, you were actually imprisoned. So the reason why I gave you the story was to show you that he almost got independence for India within 15 years. And it was only 17 years after this incident that he finally got independence for India. So perseverance is a trait that only extraordinary people can have. I had a film, but we won't go to the film because the dialogues are extremely critical in that film, and I'll request all of you to actually have a look at the film online. It's available on YouTube under a channel under my name. But I think it's very important to note that without perseverance, without putting in those 32 years, it would have been very, very difficult for him to achieve independence. And I think we need to replicate that in our lives today and actually go out there and have a single-minded goal to cause change. Now, coming to the third quality that we would like to discuss is strategy. So Mahatma Gandhi, we said that he's morally right. He's got a lot of perseverance in him, but he was a great strategist. And one of the best examples I can give you of strategy of him is, the way he conducted the Salt March. So Salt March was a march that he took out from the place he was staying, which was Sabarmati Ashram in Gujarat. And he was planned to walk for 241 miles to the seashore, to a town called Dandi, and actually make salt. You would ask, why make salt? In those days, the British government would not allow anybody to make salt. You had to buy only licensed salt. And in a country like India, if you cannot buy salt, which is the basic sustenance of this country, because, for doing any preservation of any food, for, day-to-day life, Indian food, you need salt. Salt was the basic. So the British controlled it through a licensed monopoly. And Mahatma Gandhi said, let me just get 300 million people in India to make salt. And he said, there would be something very interesting that will happen then. The British would not be able to stop us. Well, how do you do that? You don't have Facebook, you don't have Twitter. But what he had was he had an excellent communication with journalists around the world. What he had was a very, very simple strategy. So coming back to the place where he started was Sabarmati. The place where he was supposed to end is Dandi. It was 241 miles. And he decided, saying that I will complete this journey in 24 days. And in those 24 days, he said, I will stop at 48 villages. And at each village, I will speak to people, tell them why it's important, and make the campaign grow further and further from there. I often ask people, why do you think he decided to stop at 48 villages? And usually the answer is, maybe he thought that that's a good number. Maybe that's the number of people he wanted to communicate. But I can sort of give you an understanding that it was a back of the envelope calculation which said 48 villages, 24 for lunch and 24 for dinner, because he was going to walk for 24 days. And he walked 10 miles a day. Now, why did he say 10 miles a day? So if you look at his autobiography, when he was a student in England, he used to walk 10 miles a day to go to college. He started with 78 followers. 24 days later, he reached Dandi with 100,000 followers and made salt over there, broke the salt law. And at the same time, in various parts of India, 300 million people broke the salt law. There weren't enough jails to put 300 million people in for breaking the law. So, what I'm trying to point out, saying that sometimes it's extremely important to have a very simple strategy that, where people can understand, people can follow, and it causes a change. And the Salt March is considered by Time magazine among the three most famous marches that have changed the course of the world. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second was the Salt March. And the third was the March on Washington with Martin Luther King. Having said this, we can discuss a couple of more anecdotes of Gandhiji's life, but I feel that if we go more into let's take another quality of his life. Let's talk about self-reliance. Atmanirbharta, which is the government of India, our Prime Minister over here is asking us to become self-reliant. It was a concept started by Mahatma Gandhi with the charkha, right? But at the same time, he also practiced something called sarvodaya. Sarvodaya means good of all, right? The third thing he practiced, he said, be local. He's got 3 books on diet, of what to eat, how to eat, because he used to really experiment on his own body. You may have come across some talks about his fasts, which he used to take. And he says that he was able to take such crucial fasts for a number of days. That's because the way he practiced his food and eating. And he was a strong believer in saying, eat local. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Toronto, and I was sitting in a restaurant over there, and I was given this lovely menu. And then the waitress puts another menu in front of me and said, this is a go local menu. So I looked at it, and it was really nice to see. The Go Local menu was produced within 100 kilometers of that restaurant. Very, very Gandhian, very, very interesting thought. So Gandhiji's philosophy always traveled not only for independence, but it also believed in things like Atmanirbharta, which is self-reliance, Sarvodaya, and thereafter we're talking about Praja Vikas. Praja Vikas is another interesting. It means people's growth. And last we come to he talks about Nai Taaleem. Nai Taaleem is a constant learning that has to go on in your life. You cannot say that my learning has ended right now, and you people keep evolving, keep learning, and keep going ahead. So these are the other factors which, in today's life we can adopt, and we can, keep trying to get, more out of his life. But I will encourage all of you to actually read his autobiography, My Experiments with Truth. It's spread across 2 volumes. It's got very short chapters, but as you read the chapters, you will realize how as an individual he changed. Often, you will see that there are statements which talk about saying that he was a racist because he wrote this at the age of 24 in South Africa. But then at the same time, you see his evolution after that. Or you see the famous words of Nelson Mandela, who actually tell him that he arrived as a Mahatma. He arrived as a barrister, as a lawyer. But when he left the shores of South Africa, he left as the Mahatma. He had evolved in those 20 years. A lot of people gained from his experience over there. So as the chapters go on, you will there's something in it for everybody. For example, the book that we've produced a photobiography on Mahatma Gandhi's life. And I've done something very interesting. It's a book of about 300 pages. And at the bottom, I have something which is called an age line running. So every page, you have an age below that. So what did he do at the age of 8? What did he do at the age of 16? How old was he when he did this at the age of 30? And it goes on. And Gandhiji lived till the life of 78 plus. So I often tell people, I said, you take this book, however old you are, you open that page and you start reading from there. You use this book as a barometer for your own life. You start from that age and you see the amount of change that you will be able to cause. The reason for this is the time has come where we are not trying to turn people into Gandhians anymore. The time has come to look for the next Gandhi. The time has come to find the next 100 Gandhis. The world needs them today. With all the violence that we have, now all the compassion that we need for the pandemic that's going on, I think we need people to follow the thought of Mahatma Gandhi for this world. Well, that's what I have for you. I mean, I would love some questions so that I can, talk more and give you some more insight from the experiences that I have had. Just before we go there, I think Professor Mathur pointed out one very interesting statement. He said, I like to say that I learn from the young and I speak to the old. And I'd just like to tell you why I say that, because I think the young have this uncluttered mind, and sometimes they can give you statements which are very, very profound. And that is why I like to talk about that. And let me give you an example. Some of you need to know a little bit of Indian mythology. So we have an epic called the Ramayana, in which there is the Ravan. Now, Ravan is the person who has got 10 heads. It was a 10-year-old who asked me, which side of Ravana had more heads? Because one side had to have more heads. So that is the reason why I like to say, look at the young and speak to the old, because the young have a lot of profound wisdom sometimes to give you, which can take you forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Yajnik. And for me, it was truly a learning experience hearing you. I knew about Mahatma Gandhi. I think what I learned from today's talk is much more than what I knew. And particularly, I see that some of the points that you talked about, like the way he was morally right and the way he was into perseverance and he was a good strategist, I think it's all the more relevant for the scientific community. And I would like to now present in front of you a few questions that I see here. Let me start with the first question by Mr. Narayanan Subramaniam. His question to you is, have Mahatma Gandhi's great thoughts and ideals about the environment, economy, and development been mapped into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030?
I'll be very honest with you. I do not have that information with me. However, I wish they have been mapped. My personal interaction at the United Nations was in 2010, when I got the opportunity to actually release the photobiography over there. And we actually went out there and we actually had a digital exhibition to complement it. But this is something which, I can definitely take as feedback more than answering a question, and actually go out, and it can become a interesting topic of conversation to talk more and explain to people if there is a match or if there is no match.
Thank you. The next question is from an anonymous person attendee. His question is, what is the reason behind the obsolescence of the idea of Swaraj and Ram Rajya?
Well, this is, Ram Rajya has to be defined. So I was given a very interesting topic the other day to talk about, how are we going to see how our leaders are performing for the last 70 years. India is going to become 75 very shortly, right? In another couple of years, another year, the way you calculate it, within a year or within 24 months, will be 75. And how do you see how these leaders of ours have performed? Looking at the life of Gandhiji and, speaking, I've been following the aspect of dharma. So when you start looking at the story of dharma, you come across something called Raj Dharma. Now, Raj Dharma is nothing but 10 qualities of what leaders of ours should have. And they say that Emperor Ashok was one of those leaders who had all the 10 qualities. We are actually in the process of mapping out the qualities against the leaders that we have had as one of our projects right now going on at the Digital Museum, to actually extrapolate and show that how leaders have been able to take these qualities and influence the people and, give them what they want.
Thank you. So one more question from S. Vishwanathan. If Gandhi was alive today, would he support globalization or want each country to be isolated in economic terms and trade? I'm trying to understand the balance between self-reliance and the need to help others.
I've been also trying to understand the question of migration of immigrants to different countries, and sometimes certain countries you can see the backlash that is happening over there. for the people who are migrating over there. Having said that, the reason why migration started happening because there was a need for jobs over there. The people over there were not, they needed people to come and build their economies. And suddenly something changed over a period of time. And today some portions of those sections of the same society are trying to say that, you're not welcome over here at the same time. Some nations allow us to immigrate and become citizens of that country. Some nations allow us only to work for our lifetime and go back to our country. The reason why I'm saying this is personally, I think the time has come where nations, and I could be wrong, and I've always reached out to people like Ila Gandhi, who was the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi, to correct my thoughts. But if I was to say that today, Gandhiji would support globalization in certain fields so that it helps mankind. For example, I think he would definitely support globalization when it comes to healthcare. But when it comes to manufacturing of goods, when it comes to agriculture, I think he would be more towards being self-reliant in your own country.
Yeah, Nandini Ray asks one more question. Her question is, many political parties had emerged prior to first general election in India, being proclaimed them the heritage of Gandhian thought, but they couldn't pursue his ideology in Indian political system. Why did that happen? Should I repeat that question?
Yeah. Please, can you please repeat that?
I'll repeat the question.
Yes, please.
Many political parties had emerged prior to first general election in India, in India being proclaimed them the heritage of Gandhian thought, but they couldn't pursue his ideology in Indian political system. Why did that happen?
The best answer I can give you is I'll compare this to South Africa. When President Mandela offered the Rainbow Nation theory, everybody was very happy with it. But the discontentment that you see 20 years later is very evident. Now, we can say that, was he right? Was he wrong? So I think the expectation of people is always going to be very different. Gandhiji's value systems and the way he wanted us to have India is what we need to strive to. But I think we will always have to strive harder and harder. Now, let me explain this to you in another way. I went to Sabarmati Ashram, that is the ashram of Gandhiji, which he set up when he returned from South Africa. And there are 10 rules over there. And I started reading rule one by one by one. And after rule number 9, I looked at this gentleman who was the senior most trustee over there. And I said, Amrit Bhai, I have a problem. So he said, what is the problem? I said, it's going to be very difficult to follow all these rules. So he laughed and he said, I'll give you a little secret. It was very, very difficult even for Mahatma Gandhi to follow all these rules. What you are supposed to do is, can you follow rule number 1, 10%, 20%, 30%? And as you progress in your life, you try and follow all the 10 rules in 100%. So the expectations will always be in Gandhian thought to be really, really high. We have to keep trying.
Well, thank you so much. There's one question from Daniel Stadler from Professor Mathur's lab. His question is, how can we bring the message of eating locally in a time when people believe in superfoods from all over the world?
I live in Hyderabad. And there is a very interesting organization over there called ICRISAT. Apparently, they've been there for about 20 or 30 years, or maybe even more. It's a World Bank funded organization. But the reason why I'm saying that, I got to meet the director of food sustainability over there. And he was, he started talking to me and he said, you know what? You all have got diet of rice and wheat today. But earlier, you used to have a diet of millets. And he said, I'd like to introduce you to something called smart foods. And what he started showing me just took over my imagination. He started showing me ragi-based pizzas. I'm sorry, I don't know the term for, in India it's called ragi. Then, there's bajra. These are local millets which are grown, which are extremely high in iron, do not require too much water. It's the crop that is supposed to be grown in the Deccan Plateau. And this is how we have to promote it. So I think the time has come where we need to start introducing what is locally grown, what is supposed to be grown in the more modern ways, like you call it the ragi pizza. I mean, I thought that was very, very interesting to this thing, and introduce it in such a way that the people or the children are able to adopt it. Having said this, let me just give you one more example. I was hearing a talk on education, and there was people complaining about video games, of how children get addicted to video games. And that's when an educationist pointed out, saying that the addiction of video games is because the video game is able to surprise the child and give him something new every 10 seconds. The fault lies with us that our textbooks are not able to do the same. The day your textbooks are able to emulate a video game and able to give that amount of information and that surprise and that learning, you will see that the child would get addicted to the textbook also.
Thank you so much. There are a few questions on partition. So I'll just read out the question from Ashwati Radhakrishnan from Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham. Her question is, I grew up reading Gandhi. To me, he has been a way of life. But many a times I have come across people believing that he was responsible for the partition of India. It is very painful to hear that. Still, why is it so? I think other questions also more or less are in that lines. I mean, people do have questions on his role or his decision in partition of India.
I'll answer this question, but at the same time, if you noticed, I have tried to explain to people, saying that Mahatma Gandhi was he was not a person with no flaws. I have never seen him sign with the word Mahatma. It's always MK Gandhi or Bapu. We made him the Mahatma. We called him the greatest. And now we want to put the onus of him to have all the qualities of the greatest and not having any fault. So I think the time has come where the younger generation needs to put more effort and time on seeing the qualities that made him who he was, rather than have a debate sometimes of saying that when he was assassinated, did he say, "Hey Ram," before he died? I think it's time that we create value with our conversation. Now I'll go back to the question on partition. I think Mahatma Gandhi is the father of the nation. We call him Bapu. And I think when something goes wrong with your country, it is more to point out saying that you being there, you let it happen. I think that was the initial frustration, which I think the first generation which faced partition had, saying that with you being there, how could you allow this? And I think he understood that pain very well, because on the 15th of August, 1947, Mahatma Gandhi was not in New Delhi at the Red Fort unfurling the flag. He was actually at Naukhali trying to separate the riots that were going on over there and trying to get peace. On the day after 32 years, when he should have been actually saying that I got you independence, he was nowhere there, but he was in the eastern part of India trying to tell people, saying that, calm down, let's not kill each other, we are all brothers. I mean, that's the only answer I can give you, that he also felt really, really bad about the partition.
Thank you. There's one question on what are your thoughts on bringing Gandhian philosophy to the present day science and technology?
It's often said that Gandhiji was against modernization. There has been I have read the reviews that Gandhiji would have been against industrialization. From the number of photographs that I have seen, he was a very man who adopted things very fast. Like, for example, when we talk about the charkha, he got it into India in somewhere between 1915 and 1920. But the charkha already existed in UK in the 15th century. It existed much before that in Persia. So he was able to adopt science and technology for his cause very fast. I have seen photographs of his looking into navigation equipment. I have seen him very curious looking into microscopes. I'm aware that there are some recorded stories of him visiting the Sipla plant and talking to them about Atmanirbharta, and apparently the company still follows the principle of pricing that is more economical and people friendly. So I think Gandhian values today would be very applicable, because he would have adopted, he was a person who would have promoted science, and I think he would have said that profit is good, not a problem, but don't make obscene profit, and what you do with that profit is more important.
Thank you. There's one question. The question is, why don't we consider Gandhi as a politician while he keeps his keeps perfect political views? Tirtha Sridharan is the person who has asked this question.
So it depends on who you speak to, and if you write to his granddaughter, Ila Gandhi, she will tell you he was a politician. If you speak to some of the newer generations, they would say that, oh, well, we know a little bit about him, and he was a freedom fighter. If you talk about somebody who's in the first generation who got his independence, or if you look at some of the industrialists who was closely associated with him and spent their lives with him, they would say, you can't call him a politician, you can't call him a freedom fighter. He was our father. So I think it's very contextual.
Okay. One more question from Narayanan Subramaniam. How do we reorient ourselves to reduced per capita consumption per Gandhi's ideals? This is the best way for sustainability and to address climate change.
Stop buying brands and become a brand. Okay. So personally, when I started running my company, I guess it was very important to have a Mont Blanc pen in a pocket. I guess it was very important to fly business class. Then you realize that economy works as well. A simple ball pen also works. A car with 4 wheels will anyhow get you from one place to the other. And you start making decisions. I'll give you an example of this. So my daughter is 14 years old, and I told her, I said, we're going to go shopping today, and here's a credit card for you, and you can swipe whatever you want to buy. Only condition, we will buy what we need, and we will not buy what we want. Every time you have to make a decision, you will ask yourself this question, and then you will take a decision and buy it. 3 hours later, we came back with a dictionary. So what I'm trying to say is it's something that we all have to inculcate in ourselves. I personally, now I think, if you my personal expenditure is down to very basics. If you take away my travel and my, basic sustenance, food levels and all, I think I can survive for less than 1,500 rupees a month. And I said, you don't buy brands anymore. You don't need brands. You just need to buy practical things, practical decisions, and life will become very, very simple.
Thank you. There's one question from Sanjay Mathur. It was one night of disappointment and mental agony after the infamous experience of being literally thrown out of the train in South Africa that transformed Gandhi. Is every ordinary human being capable of converting the energy of anger into a creative pursuit? In other words, what Gandhian qualities should be adopted so that scientists can make an impact and change?
So, Professor Mathur, that incident that you're talking about, the 125th anniversary of that incident was 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And I had the opportunity to be there. And I had the opportunity to be there at 9 o'clock at night. And it's the Southern Hemisphere. And I realized how cold it was. It was bitterly cold. And I was actually installing the digital exhibition over there to be opened next morning by our Honorable External Affairs Minister. And it got me thinking, saying that what happened that day that he felt, this kind of feeling came up in him. And if you read his autobiography, actually he says that his first impression was actually fear. It was so much fear that he was shivering, but he didn't have the guts to go up or ask the people where my suitcase was to take out the jacket from there, because the fear was that either to get assaulted or to get insulted again. As a result, he said, I will shiver in this place. As the night wore on, and he writes in his on his autobiography, it turned into resolve, saying that no, there is something happening over here. This wrong has been done. So it happened over a period of 4 or 5 hours. But being Gandhi the way he was so brutally honest sometimes in his way of writing. He has given us the insight of all of us having fear first and then transforming to the next stage, the next stage, the next stage, the next stage. And I think for all of us, that statement is very important, which says the 2 most important days in our life is the day we were born and the day we know why. I think Gandhiji got that answer to the day we know why on that day. I think for all of us, the moment we get the answer to that second question, it becomes a decisive moment for all of us.
Thank you. One question from Pranay is, please can you explain how Gandhiji's viewpoint on racism changed over time?
Okay, so when he reached South Africa, you have to understand he reached as a 24-year-old lawyer who was wearing a very fancy suit. His client had bought him a first-class ticket to travel. His luggage was probably the highest grade of luggage that he was there. And then he was, going to go and represent him in another city, and he was leading a very, very polished life, because when he had gone to England, one of the things that he had done over there was he had explored how to be an Englishman, right? It is on record that he tried to learn violin. He bought the best suits over there, but over time he also realized that he needs to be frugal, and he read the Bhagavad Gita for the first time over there. He joined the vegetarian club. He transformed himself, but at the end of the day, he was still a very polished lawyer who came back to India, and then he was being sent to South Africa. And when he went there, the only interaction he was having was with the Indians over there. And these were Indian merchants. And then they were introducing him to some people from other places to talk to him and to find out. And so you're the first barrister actually in South Africa. And at the same time, he started looking at the native people. He had no contact with the native people at all. He was only having contact with the merchants, and then over time he started having a bit of a contact with our Indian indentured labor, who he started, whose cases he started fighting. Somewhere along this time, he was imprisoned. And if I recall right, he was imprisoned at the Constitution Hill, which was the jail at that point of time. I would personally recommend any of you to go and see the jail. It is a jail that takes human dignity away totally, to such an extent that I will just give you one example. The only way you are allowed to eat in that jail is if you are using the bathroom. So it is the most disgusting thing that you can ever see or experience. And they were flooded, and he was put in the same jail cells as the natives. And that is where his first statement comes out, saying that if you treat the white man separate from the native and you give him a separate jail, I also have to be treated separate from these people, because these people are native. And he uses the word kafir at that point of time. And he says, they are only interested in their land and their cattle. Why are you, putting me with them? But again, understand, he's 24 years old. He's a lawyer. In the next few years, he's been thrown in this place where it's the most disgusting place that you can ever see. I have personally been there. If you look at the isolation cells over there, if you look at the torture cells over there, if you see, just to give you another example, there would be soup that would come, right? The top part of the soup would be given to the black people. The middle part of the soup would be given to the Indians. The real gravy at the bottom would be given to the white man who was in jail. There was discrimination across the board, right? So he protested, and his writings are that he protested, saying that you are able to, you have to differentiate between me and them. And that's where his first racism charge is met. But after that, if you see, he is the person who inspired the ANC. Today, if you look at the ANC leadership and you ask them about Mahatma Gandhi, they will tell you that, yes, we were inspired by him because he showed us the way. If you see an article, and I can share the article with you, written by Nelson Mandela, comparing his life to Gandhi's life and his prison term and things like that, he says that Mahatma Gandhi was not a racist, and whatever views he may have had when he came into our country, by the time he departed 20 years later, he had departed as the Mahatma.
Thank you very much. I think there are a few more questions, but in the interest of time, I think I should hand it over to the Dean of Global Engagement, Professor Raghunathan. So I think he will present the vote of thanks. Professor Raghu, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Birad Rajaram. It was a really wonderful seminar, and you can see the effect of the seminar from the number of questions that you have still left unanswered. So I would request that maybe these questions can be sent to you if you can be kind enough to answer them. We will put all the questions and answers also in the website so that we have a record of all of this, not only a video, but also a written record of all of this. I really thank you very much. And the three main qualities that you talked about, other than the other ones, persevere and strategy are, of course, very, very critical for research also. You don't get really good results without persevering, nor can you get good results without strategy. This seminar series itself, the idea is also to bring in social relevance to research, and the other quality you talked about in terms of morally doing the right thing actually fits in so nicely with this webinar series. I really thank you for taking your time and then spending this time with us. And hopefully you will tune back in sometime, maybe listen to some of the other seminars, and maybe come back again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Look forward to engaging again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay, Professor Sanjay, for comparing this also, and for all the participants.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, thanks.
And Ravi Kumar, because your colleague, if I forgot to mention you, I'm sorry.
No, I thank your office because I think your office has done a great job. Thanks to you and your entire team for hosting this webinar. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.